Tonight, I want to talk about some of the relationships that we Christians need to have in our lives in order to do well in our faith. We mentioned last week about what is it that a pastor wants. And we said, no, it's not money, it's not fame, it's not a following. The pastor's heart is for their congregation to do well spiritually, to live lives that are worthy of the calling of the gospel. And so tonight, with that in mind, I want to outline 3 important relationships that every Christian ideally should have and should pursue in order to have a healthy faith. So if you got your Bibles, which I know you do, is turn to Hebrews chapter 3, please. See, when we think about living the Christian life, and not just living the Christian life, but to do well and thrive in the Christian life, we need some key relationships because our hearts are prone to wander. And this was the issue for the Christians to whom the author of Hebrews was writing. They were under persecution. They were thinking, was it worth for me to keep being a Christian? Should I turn back to the old ways of Judaism or just stop following God altogether or whatever it might be? And one of these nuggets that probably you've heard, I know you've all heard before, is from Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12 and 13, where Christians are encouraged to take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So do you hear what the author is saying there? There's some sense in which it's hard to keep living the Christian life because we may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. I want to examine that just for a second, this idea of being deceived by or being hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. See, I think that happens from within and from without. It happens from within because, as we know from experience and as we know the Bible tells us, like our hearts are evil and wicked. You don't need to teach some of the behaviors that I've seen my children exhibit, like hitting and throwing remotes and things like that. Like they didn't learn that off their parents. It's not something they picked up, like seeing me throw a remote at my wife and go, oh, cool, I'm going to do that. I've never done that. Yet children, we need to teach them good behavior. Bad behavior is just, it's in us. And the heart is wicked and evil. And that's why, if left to our own devices, we're always going to choose selfishness and whatever's going to benefit us rather than helping other people, right? And so from our own hearts, we're bent towards sin and bent towards being hardened by the deceitfulness of sin from our own hearts. That's just our natural bent. But it's not just from within, it's also from without, from the outside, not just our own hearts. And because the message of the world is going to be one that says, oh, you take care of yourself. It's all about self-care, self-promotion. It's all about you and what you feel like doing. And so our hearts can be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin in the message of the outside world. And also, because of that, sometimes just the world that we live in, the fishbowl that we grow up in, right? We grow up with all these assumed messages of what we assume to be true because that's just what we've grown up in. And it's nothing malicious, it's just the world and the times that we grow up in are going to shape our worldviews and our thoughts and what we believe about things. And so that might bend us towards sin, even though we're not pursuing it, we're not trying to be evil, we're just fooled by the world that we live in and grow up. And with these unbiblical worldviews and assumptions that we just take on board, right? I had to be taught so many things about what the Bible says, because the things that I assumed about the world was just assumed because I grew up in the world. But the ways of God, I had to be taught, no, that's actually evil. That's not a good thing. Or even if it's not a matter of good or bad or evil or righteous, it was just things I got wrong. I've told you many times about, I had all these thoughts from my own head just from growing up and hearing things in the media about, okay, men and women are like this, or the church is about this, or the purpose of church is this, and what? I just had all these assumptions, but I needed God's word to tell me what is actually true, not just my assumed beliefs from growing up. And so, we have this, we're prone to being deceived by sin from our own hearts and from outside the messages that we get. And so the antidote to that, according to this text, is through relationships, is through some of the people in our lives. So look at the passage again, verse 12. Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. Verse 13, but exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So do you see there? There's a sense of, hey, you've got to exhort one another, encourage one another, remind one another. And it's speaking to relationships. There are some relationships that we need to have where this exhorting of one another, as long as it is called today, is happening. And so some key relationships that we need. First one is church. We need a church to belong to. So if you can jump to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, please. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. This is Paul writing to the church in Corinth, and he's talking about all sorts of things, particularly as it relates to church life. And one of the things that he talks about, particularly in chapter 12, is a metaphor for what the church is. And the metaphor that he uses is what? This is an open book test. You got it right in front of you. Body. He's a doctor. A body. The church is like a body. So he talks about, so every Christian, it's particularly specifically in relation to spiritual gifts. And so he's saying, okay, you're an ear, you're a leg, you're a liver, you're a heart, you're a brain, whatever. But on its own, what's it good for? It's all working together and trying to bless and help each other. So a church is supposed to all participate together as one body. And so you look around this room right now. Thank you. And these people that you see around you, they are supposed to be your arm and leg and foot and toe and so on. Like, we're all meant to be part of this one body together. So the first thing, if we want to have a healthy Christian life, is to be part of a body. So in a theological sense, every Christian everywhere belongs to the body because we're all part of the one body. But that's supposed to be lived out, actually expressed. You can't be a hermit somewhere in Kerikeri and just be like, oh, sweet, I'll be a Christian on my own, and I'm part of the church body. Yeah, you are theologically part of the church body, but you need to actually go live that out. So every Christian needs to have a church that they call their own. If I walked up to you right now and I said, oh, hey, what? I mean, this is kind of dumb because we're all at a church. But if I bumped into you at Kmart tomorrow and I said, hey, what church do you go to? You should be able to say, every Christian should be able to answer, yep, I belong to so-and-so church. I'm a member there, I serve, I'm known, and whatnot. So let's just quickly talk. Just want to explain why being part of a church body means that it's going to be healthy for your spiritual well-being. Well, first of all, as you can see up there, this is not so much a spiritual one, but you have provision for needs. So the Bible tells us that Christians are supposed to have favorites we're supposed to play favorites towards other Christians. It doesn't mean we hate unbelievers. No, we love unbelievers. We love everyone, but we have a special love for our brothers and sisters. And so whenever we see a brother or sister in need, it's the church's responsibility, as well as their family, obviously, to step in and help. And so if Claudia is unable to feed herself this week, then we're supposed to step up and go, Claudia, you're my sister. We're part of the same church. I'm going to make your breakfast tomorrow, and Izzy's going to make your lunch, and Josh is going to do your dinner, and Steph's going to... we're supposed to take care of each other. So there's the sense where provisions are supposed to be made. And so Christians should never be going without. Christians should always be taking care of each other. But also, the reason why being part of a church is good for our spiritual well-being is because God has determined that every Christian belongs to a church. And every church is supposed to be run, I believe, biblically, supposed to be run by a plurality of elders. So that means more than one person. So you remember, I don't know if you remember, but when Paul wrote to Titus, and he was pastoring on what island? Crete, thank you. Pulling teeth. What's the first thing he tells Titus to do? So Titus is gone to Crete and trying to minister there. What's the first thing he's got to do according to the Bible? He says, you got to find some elders, establish some elders, and form an eldership. And what elders are going to do is they're going to lead the church, but also they are shepherds. So a pastor and elder is the same thing. It's the same office. And pastors and elders are supposed to be shepherds for the flock. So they're supposed to take care of the flock and spiritually guide the flock and feed and protect. And so what it means to be part of a church means to sit under the authority or submit ourselves to spiritual leaders that God has placed over that church. Now, obviously, some people will abuse that. Some leaders are jerks. Some people are... all that stuff. Now, I'm not saying you have to follow toxic leadership. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying just generally speaking, that is the design of God, that he has placed elders, and every Christian is supposed to be part of a church and submit ourselves to an eldership. And obviously, the elders are supposed to be godly people who care for the flock and not... the Bible's going to give all sorts of instructions towards elders about not being jerks. But why that's good is because being part of a church and being under the authority and submitting ourselves to elders means that there's some level of accountability, right? So we can't just go knocking about and doing all kinds of sin, because actually there's some level of accountability. Oh, I'm accountable to this church. I've willingly submitted myself to the authority of this church, who are under the authority of Christ, obviously. And so there's accountability. We can't just willy-nilly go do whatever we want. There's also a sense of, in line with that, deterring us from sin. You see, we're prone to be tempted towards sin, and amongst all the other things, best case scenario is, man, I love my Lord so much that I don't want to do anything that's going to dishonor him, right? We're supposed to have a zeal for God and let that be the main driving force. Cool, for sure, of course. But, there are systems like church discipline that are supposed to actually deter us from sin. Man, I really want to shoot up on heroin tonight, but I'm not going to, because willfully sinning is actually going to lead to church discipline, and I don't want to go through that process. Right? There's some sense where it's going to deter us from sinning. And elders are supposed to guard doctrine. See, that's one of the jobs of an elder, is to teach the truth and to guard the truth. And guard and promote sound doctrine, healthy doctrine. And so whether you are teaching
good or bad doctrine, or you're hearing good or bad doctrine, the elders are part of a church to kind of like make sure all the doctrine is all kosher. Right? And so often, many times, actually this happened on Friday. Many times people will ask me like a question about something. And on Friday, I was speaking at this thing, and someone asked me in a Q&A time. It had nothing to do with anything I spoke about, but he put up his hand, he's like, "Sir," he didn't call me sir, "Hey, do you believe in the rapture?" And my answer to him was like, "My brother, it makes absolutely no difference to your life whether I believe in the rapture or not. That's a question for you and your pastor," right? Because the pastor / elder is supposed to take care of the doctrine of the church, of their church. So it's not for me to like go tell this guy from, I don't know, Windsor Park or whatever, "Hey, here's rapture or not rapture or blah, blah, blah," whatever. So my point is being part of a church and having elders in your life means that there's some sense of doctrinal protection so that we don't go wayward and following weird rabbit holes and whatnot. So what this means then, one implication of that is like being part of a church means that there is a pastor or an elder, same thing, who actually knows you. Like, they know you, you know them. They're a real life pastor, not like, "I listen to John MacArthur on YouTube and he is my pastor." No, he's not. He's some dude you listen to on YouTube. Right? So there needs to be like a real life pastor who actually knows you. I'm not throwing shade on John MacArthur. I'd listen to John MacArthur. He's all good. But my point is it's a real life thing. And so we actually have to be like in an embodied relationship where like, "Oh, yep, I know Steph knows me, and there's actually some kind of relationship." And that's where some of these benefits of being part of a church come through. It's described as a body. We're all supposed to kind of be together. But also, another reason why it's good for our spiritual well-being is because we actually get to exercise our spiritual gifts and be ministered to by the spiritual gifts of others. Right? That's specifically what this passage is talking about spiritual gifts. There are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are varieties of service, but the same Lord. There are varieties of activities, but it's the same God who empowers them all in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. This is 1 Corinthians 12, by the way. For to one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, prophecy, ability to distinguish between spirits, various kinds of tongues, and other interpretations. These are all empowered by one and same Spirit, who apportions to each one individually as he wills. And then after that, Paul's going to talk to them about how the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. And so we're all supposed to use our gifts to bless each other. Now, this doesn't only happen in the confines of a church, right? It's not like I can only serve between 5:30 and 7 p.m. on a Sunday. No, you can serve each other and the world Monday through Sunday. But primarily, when it comes to encouraging other Christians, that's going to happen on a Sunday. And so, like, I say this without an ounce of coercion in my body, and I couldn't coerce you anyway, like, look at me. Every Christian who belongs to a church should be exercising some kind of gifting they have to edify and bless other people, right? So, like, if you're like a really welcoming and kind and generous, hospitable kind of person, you should be flexing that gift when you come to church to make sure other people feel welcome, right? And so those people are benefiting from you being a kind, welcoming person. And so you can think about the inverse, right? You're being strengthened because you're using your gift. I've told you before this one time when I broke my leg and I stopped playing football because the bone was broken. And then, like, I started playing football like 7 or 8 months later. And then if you compared my left calf with my right calf, it was like day and night. Or it was like one leg that had a broken bone for 8 months and one leg that didn't have a broken bone for 8 months. The muscles, they shriveled up, atrophy, right? And so there's a sense in which when it comes to our spiritual gifts, like when we exercise that muscle and keep flexing it and keep using it, like it strengthens. And as it strengthens, we're blessed because we get to like operate in our strengths and do something that we're good at and that we love doing. And then other people are blessed because they get to experience the benefit of that. So the challenge tonight is, man, if you want to be part of a church and do well spiritually in that way, is there an area of service that you want to be part of? Or maybe you're not serving in any way? Like, come talk to us. We want to make that happen. And it's not so that we can have more people on the band, or we can have more people at the sound desk and Shane can have a break at least once a month. I mean, that's true. But it's not about just filling roles and ticking boxes. It's about allowing people to exercise spiritual gifts and to bless the body and themselves be blessed. Because why? Why does it come back to? It comes back to making sure everyone has a spiritual home that they can call their own. Because what happens when Christians have a spiritual home that they can call their own? Not a trick question. They do well. They do well. Another relationship that we need is mentors and disciples. Mentoring relationships and disciples. Let's go to Titus. Titus chapter 2. So Titus, Paul is writing to who? Yes, you're getting, yes, all right. Hearing some responses. So Paul is writing to Titus, who was ministering on what island? Crete. Oh man, this side coming in hot. The island of Crete. Now the thing about Crete was like the ancient day New York or California or Melbourne or any one of these debaucherous places. And it was just a worldly place. And one of the main thought behind Paul's letter to Titus in Crete was, how do Christians live strong Christian lives in amidst a world of worldliness, in a world that's so anti-God? How do Christians live their lives? And so what he talks about as first thing, what's the first thing he tells Titus to do? Elders, thank you. I'm losing hope in you guys. Establish elders. Yep, get some elders, some good role models. And then he's going to talk about what the life of the church is supposed to look like in the Christian church. And he talks about some of these relationships. So chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. We're not going to unpack it, but you're just going to see the overall idea. As for you, Titus, teach what accords with sound doctrine. That means healthy doctrine. And listen to this. Listen to the relationships of mentoring and discipleship that's supposed to take place in a church. Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith and love and in steadfastness. Older women, likewise, are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good. And so to train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. You, Titus, show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned. So there's a sense where the older men are supposed to set an example. Titus, even though he was a young man, was supposed to set an example. The older woman was supposed to actively teach the woman how to be mature Christians. And so again, we're not going to unpack all of that, but there's a sense where within the church, there are supposed to be relationships of older and younger where learning is taking place. And we heard from Philippians chapter 3, verse 17 or 18 last week, where Paul tells the Philippians, hey, follow my example and look at the examples of older people in your life too. So this relationship is supposed to happen. And you might be going, okay, well, how do I identify the kind of older Christians that I need as mentors? Because I don't need to explain too much about why it's good to have a mentor, right? It's good to have a mentor. They'll instruct you and be a good example. Well, how do you find a good mentor? Well, number one, we got to be around older Christians, right? I said this last week. So next Sunday, when Alyssa Childers comes and does her presentations, like that's a great opportunity for you to come to the morning service, maybe for the first time, and to have the poiki lunch in between and hang out with other Christians and just build relationships with older Christians. Do that. Be around older people. And then secondly, you want to ask yourself, hey, where am I lacking in the Christian life? Like, I feel like I'm really good evangelist, but I just struggle so much with being a good husband. And then you just want to be in relationship with older Christians who you look at and is like, oh man, Jay Headley, he's such a great husband. Like, I want to learn from him what it means to be a Christian husband. So to be around Christians and to recognize kind of something that our area I want to grow in, and go seek out those people. And then ask. And they might say, actually, I don't have time right now, so ask me again in 6 months. I don't know. But probably most older Christians would be like happy to be like, oh man, they want to grow in this area. I want to try help them as much as we possibly can. And to disciple another younger Christian is actually a command. So like every Christian should be doing it, which means we shouldn't just be looking for mentors or just have people who are discipling us. There's actually a call on Christians to be in some way discipling others, to be teaching others, usually those who are younger than us. So in the Great Commission, right, Jesus tells, as he establishes the church, like he's go make disciples of all nations, like baptizing them and teaching them what Jesus commands and how to obey those commands. So like for those of us who are parents, like it's on a platter, right? Like our children are our first port of call for discipleship. That responsibility to disciple our children, that's primarily on us. I think I've told you before, before I had kids, and like I was running the youth group back then, and like there were like complexities and things to think about, and I was always like, cool, like discipleship of young people is really important, but we're just the youth ministry, right? We're the cherry on top. The main responsibility is on the parents, so I can take it easy. But then now I've become said parent, and so it's like I have to realize, the weight of discipleship of my children is on me. So guys, can I just say, while I got you here, don't be one of these Christians. Don't be one of these Christians who offload the discipleship of their children to church or to grandparents. Like that's, one day, Lord willing, if you have children, that is your responsibility first and foremost. Definitely have the input of grandparents in the church, definitely. But the first primary responsibility for discipleship, parents. Get ready for that, guys. Anyway, so this cycle of discipleship doesn't work if everyone just wants mentors but is not willing to mentor other people, right? You see how that makes sense, right? If all of us are just asking people to mentor us but saying, no, thank you, I just want a mentor for myself, like that, it doesn't work. We all need to be doing it. And so I want us to consider, hey, as it pertains to like being discipled by someone, okay, how can I rub shoulders with older, stronger Christians who can be examples? But who are the people that I can minister to, as well? Because, this is how that's going to grow us. It's going to stretch us. Because now you've like actively started a relationship with someone who's allowed to ask you questions and you're setting an example for now. So it's like, oh man, all that laziness I wanted to do, I really shouldn't anymore because I have people watching me. I have Christians who kind of depend on me now. And also, it stretches us and grows us because like you actually suddenly have to rely on God all that much more for your Christian life. Like, oh, okay, I'm meeting up with Max in a couple of hours, and he's going to ask me all these hairy questions about theology and marriage and how to be a Christian husband and all that kind of stuff. And I need to have answers for him. It's okay if I don't know all the answers, but I need to be able to minister to him. And so suddenly, when we're discipling someone, there's a bigger reliance of God. Like, God, please help me, teach me, strengthen me, give me the right words to say. And so when we have those relationships, you can see how actually your Christian life is going to be strengthened when we have those things. Third one is we need good Christian friends. Let's jump to Proverbs chapter 27. Christian friendships. Here we go. I harp on about it all the time because it's worth harping on about. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17, you've heard this before. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Proverbs, remember, they're not promises, but they are general truths that usually 90% of the time will apply to every situation. And what it's saying is this metaphor of iron sharpening iron is like, as it pertains to friends, is one Christian friend and another Christian friend can sharpen each other. As iron sharpens as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. So they help each other grow and be strengthened. You see, Christian friends, this is how this happens. Christian friends, we have a particular purpose. You see, every other kind of friendship, we might have categories for, right? So we might be like, oh, yeah, he's a football friend. And so he's there in my life so that I can call up if my team needs extra players. I can send Tate a message and say, hey, can you play for us this week? Bad example because we're Christian friends. But we might have work friends, or we might have friends whom we talk about specific bands or whatever. Fine, we have all these kind of categories for what kind of friends. But when it comes to Christian friends, we have a specific purpose. And I believe it's this, to sharpen one another. And how that happens is by pointing each other to Jesus Christ. That's the role of the Christian in every realm of life, but particularly as it pertains to Christian friends, we're supposed to point each other to Jesus Christ. That might be through encouragement, or that might be through a rebuke. One way or another, we're supposed to encourage our Christian friends and point them towards Jesus Christ. You think about the life of King David, and I would very quickly, just two instances where this happened. He had his boy Jonathan, right, who encouraged him when Jonathan's old man was trying to kill David. Jonathan was the one that encouraged David by strengthening his hand in God. That's what the text says. That is like, he didn't just strengthen him, but he strengthened his hand in God. So he's reminding David of the promises of God. This is who God is. This is how faithful he has been to you in the past. And he's promised that you're going to be the king. And I know it looks pretty grim right now because my old man's trying to kill you, but you can trust God and strengthen him in that way. And so, guys, what does it mean for Christian friends to encourage one another and to point each other to Jesus Christ in our friendships? So it might look something like this. If your friend is struggling with their self-esteem and they think they're a piece of trash, and whether they're in a bad mood or whether it's mental health issues or whatever it might be, what is the Christian friend supposed to say in that situation? Well, for sure, we give them a hug, give them a shoulder to cry on, all that. We're there for them, but also we strengthen their hand in God and actually remind them that you're a child of God, that God loves you, that He has done away with your sin, He's given you His righteousness, and any sense of shame or lack of self-esteem you feel it doesn't really matter. That's temporary. How does God see you? That's what Christian friends are supposed to do. What about when Christian friends are tempted to go do the wrong thing? Are we there egging the boys on? Yeah. Have another beer. Do the yardie. Like, do Christian friends do that? Or when we are tempted, Christian friends, we point our friends to Jesus Christ and say, oh, actually, as Christians, there's a life that we're supposed to live that is worthy of this calling, And so, bro, Nathaniel, don't do the yardie. There's Christian friends supposed to do that. What about when Christian friends are weary and they're tired? We're supposed to remind them that following Jesus Christ is not burdensome, and that his yoke is light, and that we can come to him. When our Christian friends are feeling down and feeling sinful because they stuffed up again for the 600th time that day, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to remind them of God's grace. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, this is how Christian friends are supposed to be towards one another. So there was Jonathan, but there was also his mate, Nathan, who after David fell into a lot of sin, Nathan was the guy who went up to him and said, that story I just told of someone being a big jerk, I'm talking about you. You are that man. And so Christian friends are supposed to point each other to Christ, not just through the encouragement, which we need to do, but also when there is sin, we need to call that out in our friends, not so that we can be like, ha, I'm so much better at being a Christian than Gordon is. He's a loser. Not for that purpose, but what's the purpose? Yeah, thank you. To point him back to Jesus. Not to feel better about myself, but to point him back to Jesus. And so it's like, okay, when we have Christian friends who are like, I don't know, getting drunk or sleeping around with, or whatever it might be, we're not supposed to be like, oh, that's too awkward. I don't want to. Like, no, we're supposed to encourage our Christian friends and point them to Jesus no matter what. Proverbs 27, verses 5 and 6 says, better is open rebuke than hidden love. So instead of just going along with it and going, it's too awkward, open rebuke is better. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. So when our Christian brothers and sisters are falling into sin, there is a responsibility on every Christian friends, to actually kindly and gently and lovingly call that out and point them back to Jesus Christ. Hey, I noticed the guy you're dating, he's not a believer. The Bible says that Christians are supposed to only date and marry Christians. What's going on there? Hey, man, last night at the 21st, I noticed that there was just a lot of drinking in a way that was, the Bible says don't get drunk. What's going on there? Help me understand. So, like, Christian friends are supposed to. So, the question is, are we friends like this? Are we ourselves being like this? Hopefully we are. And then the other question is, how do we find friends like this? Because we need to find Christian friends like this if we want to do well in our spiritual well-being. Well, to that end, go to the events, be at church every week, stay for dinner, all of those things, those are all good. But the overarching thing advice I want to give as it pertains to making friends, and listen, I know it's hard to make friends. Making friends is hard. But here's my one advice, is trust God. What I mean by that is trust God that He knows what He's doing, and in His providential sovereign will, He has brought you to this church. And into bringing you into this church, trust that God has brought the right people into your lives at the right time to minister to you, and you can minister to them. And maybe you don't even know that person yet, but trust God. He's brought you here among these people so that you can be a good Christian friend and they can be a Christian friend to you. And so, yes, it's awkward. Yes, it's a hard slog to try make friendships with people, but trust God. Keep showing up. He's placed you here, and even though it might be awkward to go sit with someone new at dinner tonight and do awkward small talk, I don't know, just trust God. And maybe those friendships can start here. I'll invite the band back up. I want to leave us with some things for us to consider as we close with the song. And you might even write this down, and when you get home, think about this. what are some next steps for you? Because you guys have heard me long enough to know that like, I hate coming to church, hearing someone say some stuff, and then be like, cool, that was fun, and then getting out of here. No, like, let's actually take some next steps, right? So, like, as it pertains to church, do I need to commit to a church somewhere? Do I need to find some area of service? Do I need to get engaged in the life of the church some more? Do I need to find a mentor or find people that I can be mentoring? Or what is it that I want to grow in? Just all these questions that we can ask ourselves. And do I need to find older siblings that I can be, a mentor to? Can I find some Christian friends or just whatever? But the point is, it doesn't have to be one of those. The point is some sort of next step so that our being here tonight isn't just, yay, I had some yum roast that Jasmine Pablo made for us, but it actually becomes, I took even one step forward in my spiritual growth tonight. And not so that I can feel like a cool Christian, but so that we're strengthened in order to be ministers to a lost world. So would you please stand? And as we sing, or before we sing, or after we sing, you just consider those questions in your heart and make some next steps so that we don't waste this time.